Hello, Anin, Tansi. My name is Rebecca Haas. I am Georgian Bay Métis and Mixed European. My traditional territory is governed by the Williams Treaty and Robinson-Huron Treaty, and I live now on the land of the Lekwungen people in Victoria, British Columbia. I'm grateful to the stewards of this land who have cared for it since time immemorial, and I do my best to walk softly and with love and care for the land, for the waters, the four-leggeds, the winged ones, and the finned ones that I share this space with. I'm a creative maker, singer, storyteller, life coach, and I'm the Director of Engagement Programs and Partnerships with Pacific Opera Victoria. In this workshop, I want to begin with some questions I have for you. What are you here to contribute? What is the purpose of your life as an artist? How is your art a tool for change? What is your role in this? Big questions need space and time. And so I've brought you to what is known here as Gonzales Hill. To visually bring you into the space I want you to hang out in with me. You can't bring the mind of your daily to-do list to this question. I think that's sort of in the weeds. We often end up looking at all the blades of grass up close and personal with no idea what is to the right or left. And to start this journey, this is the moment to pause, take a deep breath, and get curious about these questions. My series for mass culture in the T.R.A.I.N program is titled Artists as Civic Engagers. If you're watching this, I'm already pretty sure you're engaged in some projects and some thinking about your art practice for civic good. And many of you might be actively involved in a civic practice and you're looking for more tools or clarity. In this video, I'll be inviting you to get to know yourself, your passion, your fire, and your obstacles and roadblocks, and your habits that serve you and that don't. I do all this with a view, an aspiration of moving you towards a more holistic approach with practical tools to a powerful, uniquely you civic practice, one that fulfills you and expresses your view of a good life and a good society. I'll be using the knowledge I've acquired in my work as the Director of Community Engagement for Pacific Opera and from the teachings that I've worked with in my own personal Buddhist practice over my life so far. I'll be sharing teachings that impact worldview that I've learned from Indigenous elders, knowledge keepers, and teachers as part of my walk as a Métis woman. I ask you to join me on this journey of discovery to inspiration, to plan, to action, and I invite you to keep an open mind. Take what works for you, set aside and remain curious about the things that don't resonate. And on your civic engagement journey, keep asking questions of yourself and your art. See what happens. As you look out on this view, the big picture, you can see that the world is built on an ecosystem, things interacting with each other, with outcomes. To enter into this ecosystem, we need to walk with respect for what we don't know. It's so vast. How crazy to think we could know it all. We need to walk with humbleness. When I moved here, what occurred to me right away is that the mountains were big and I was small. And that's how it's supposed to be. The environment here reminds me every day. To be humble isn't about having low self-esteem. It's seeing yourself in the big picture and to engage with natural law so that we can be brave. We can take our inspiration, our aspiration, and employ our bravery to step forward. The world will give us information which we can accept with respect and humbleness and consider what we need to learn and come back bravely and try again. To begin, we each need to vision. We need to create a space that we can hold for ideas, imagination, without judgment. And so, it's time for our very first exercise. I want you to take time to settle your heart and mind and really experience what you just witnessed, that open space. The opening exercise I'm inviting you to participate in is called Aimless Wandering. To do this, I need you to set the timer on your phone for no less than 10 minutes. Make sure you put your phone into silent mode. You don't want to be interrupted when you're going for an aimless wander. If possible, leave your home. I want you to go on a walk with no agenda, no destination. Thoughts will arise as you wander, and you're just going to notice them. There'll be things like, what's next? What am I having for dinner? Oh, I should have returned that phone call. Whatever it is, just say to yourself, thinking, and bring your mind back to the feeling of your feet as they walk, the temperature of the air around you. You're actually working towards an embodied sensation of the wander. As you wander, something is going to catch your eye, and when it does, stop. Be curious. Look at it. What's its color? What's its texture? Can you smell anything? Thoughts may arise, and you may build a story about what that flower meant or what that object was in the past for you, or who you might want to share this with. Again, just label this as thinking and let it go. Come back to the moment you're in and just feel your breath and notice the object. When you've completed whatever it was you needed to absorb about the thing that caught your interest, set off again. Continue your aimless wander. You can repeat this many times as things catch your attention, and some may take longer to look at and some not so long. Eventually your alarm will go off, and then head back, press play on this video, and we will continue. Enjoy your aimless wander. I love that exercise, the aimless wander. It's such an amazing time just to let your mind be blank and see what you notice. So much of the walking we do and exploring, we have an agenda. We're trying to see something, get somewhere, or we walk to figure things out. But I really love the opportunity, I won't say challenge, the opportunity to walk with no agenda, no time limit, and only stop and really look at those things that pop up to me. And then when I'm naturally finished looking at it, to move on. This relates to how we began this whole process, which was to have vision, to look, to see spaciousness, not to have decided what we were going to go and look at, but instead to see what showed up. And that's a way you can embody and experience that idea that I gave you off the top of that beautiful view off of Gonzales Hill. Aimless wandering is something you can do for yourself at any time. Set the timer on your phone and just wander with no purpose and see what shows up. It's a great way to open up your mind and incorporate some space and see what's bubbling under the surface. Now I want to tell you a story. I'm going to tell you a lot of stories in this video because I think storytelling is a great way to learn. And every time I tell you a story, I'm hoping it calls forward a story of your own that will deepen your own understanding and learning in this process. I want to tell you the story of how I became an artist. I grew up in a blue-collar household. My dad was a construction worker, he ran tower crane, and my mother was a housewife. My dad loved Dolly Parton, the Everly Brothers, the Beatles, a lot of country and western, Gordon Lightfoot, and he used to play by ear the guitar at family parties. My mother loved music, but was completely and is completely tone deaf, but loved musicals, Broadway musicals and plays. So musical love, very different skill set. There was no opera in my house. But as I was growing up, I was encouraged to sing, and I had some natural talent for it. After singing at family parties for many years, I moved on to local music festivals, where I was very successful. Then I moved on to high school, where I sang in the musical theater pieces. From there, I always say, I accidentally became an opera singer because I fell into a summer program and realized that singing could be a job, and it was something I had always loved to do. This is my origin story. I came from a small town. I came from unlikely roots. I'm an accidental opera singer, and it was my first, I would say, artistic practice and my most successful professional craft. What is your origin story? We all have one we tell at dinner parties or the first time we meet people and they ask us what we do. We'll tell a version of our origin story. Now is a good time to pause this video and either find a friend and retell your origin story or journal it for yourself. And be curious about how you frame the story. Inside of this story will be some of the motivations and the reasons why you pursued your art form. I don't want to do it as a spoiler, so I'm not going to tell you what mine holds inside of it. But I will say it was not where I started when I wanted to actually pursue something as a career or as my life's work. So pause the video now and take a moment and journal. So welcome back from your journaling. So my story actually has to do with the fact that I wanted to be a journalist when I was young. I watched a lot of CBC documentaries, particularly The Fifth Estate, and I fantasized about being one of those people, an investigative journalist. I even wrote a fan letter to Adrienne Clarkson, who was the host at the time of The Fifth Estate, and she responded and said, "Where do I go to school and how do I make this my life?" Everything seemed so far away when I was young, of course, living in a small town, and before the internet, needless to say. What that story illuminates to me and how I came into singing has a lot to do with my need to tell stories. If I'd become a journalist, I would have told a different kind of story. But as a singer, I was also telling a story through new work, through older works and archetypes. And when I boil it all down, that's really what calls me to my art. My art form always needs to tell a story. And I think what I've been missing in a lot of my journey was the impactful, more journalistic story. I do have a love for making change in truth-telling and fairness. So I think that's the piece that I find in civic engagement. I want to tell a story, but I want to tell a story for a purpose. As you start to think about what it is for you to work in civic engagement or a community practice, that's what I want you to think about in your own story of how you became an artist and whatever your artistic pursuit is. How does it help you have that impact you're looking for? I can tell you that over the years as a life coach, having coached hundreds and hundreds of singers and conductors and artists of all stripes, really, including regular folks, certainly inside the arts, when I ask people to come to the core as to why they do what they do, two answers have been the most, I would say, popular: communication and collaboration. Often people who work in the arts have a desire to communicate something, relates back to my storytelling. It's often articulated as moving people, and collaboration. Even though we spend a lot of time often on our own with our practice, we love getting together with other people and working as a group. So, dig into your myth, take a look at how you are manifesting your art and to what purpose, and think about what value your art allows you to express. It is not lost on me that there were many normal jobs I could have had, and probably you as well, places where some people in your family would have loved to have seen you manifest that seemed more straightforward. But there's a reason why you were called to the art form that you practice. It allows you to do something that nothing else quite did. So now is a good moment to stop and think about what that is. What does your art help you express? Our Western minds are so stuck on how and the weeds of a project, it can unleash our inner critic. It can lead to overwhelm, which stops us from starting. I want to share with you this view of the tree branches in winter. They are a reminder to us of the importance of clarity, of defined seeing. We don't need to start our project in overwhelm, with too many shoulds, or the voice of our inner critic telling us all the things we don't have to get started. It can be such a jumble of thoughts. Even in passion and inspiration, we can be overwhelmed with the enormity of our vision. How can spoil a good what? And so I don't want to start with how we're going to do this. I want to start with what, which is for the sake of what. For the sake of what will you engage in community, and what will you create? In Western teachings, I was given a goal-setting acronym. You can find it by Googling it online, but I'm sharing it here as well. It's called the S.M.A.R.T acronym. Each letter stands for an approach to goal setting through a very Western mindset. The S is for specific. For a goal to be successful, it needs to be specific. The M is for measurable. How will we know if we've achieved a goal if we can't measure it? That invites some of its own issues, I would say, and you probably can hear that already. The A is for achievable. Is your goal achievable? Attached to that, of course, is the R for realistic. Is this a realistic goal? And the T is for timely. So looking at the circumstances around you, is this the right time to embark on this project? I have a lot of issues with the S.M.A.R.T acronym. It's a difficult one for me even to share in this video with you. So because I've shared it, I now need to unpack the S.M.A.R.T acronym. When I was actively, creatively coaching artists, I brought a different form of that. And so I will share my redo and my life coach redo on the S.M.A.R.T acronym, which I think was better than the business-oriented one I just shared with you. So in the middle ground of what's possible, I would say the S is for specific. It is helpful to be clear about what you're trying to do and what you hope the outcome is. Measurable is always tricky as artists. How do we measure impact? So I think that measurable might not be counting things, number of people who attend something, but it might be a little bit more about the impact or the feeling you want to give. But measurable is a tricky one these days for me. The A, I would suggest you think about accountability. Accountability is a wonderful tool to get a goal achieved, because if we actually share with other people what we're doing, they'll check in with us. And even if just one other person knows we said we would do something and they just were to ask us, it will sometimes encourage us to move past the fear and take that first step. So accountability can be really helpful. It can also bring into play with our partners a good way of showing up. I'm going to suggest that we take the R and the T and turn them upside down from the original card I just shared about the S.M.A.R.T acronym, and we think about R for resonant and T for thrilling. This is the fuel of your project. If you do not have a goal in mind or a vision that is resonant and thrilling, nothing is likely to happen. This is what gets us through what's hard. This is what inspires us. This is the whole reason to do it. So I would actually suggest that if you work with this acronym, you start with resonant and thrilling, so that it's something that really speaks to your heart and your soul, and that's what's going to carry you through. Now, that I've offered you, the S.M.A.R.T acronym, I actually want to move to another teaching entirely. Both of those are Western-based teachings that I've received. This last one I want to talk about takes us away from the idea of the goal and moves us to something else, a circle. This is the circle teaching for vision, and I give great gratitude to Renee Mishake, an Anishinaabe elder that I work with, who shared this teaching with me and gave me permission to share it in my own journey. In this world, in the Indigenous worldview, we are actually offered an opportunity to rethink how we approach what we are embarking on. And in some ways, where I ended the last one, resonant and thrilling, is really part of the first step in this particular movement. In this circle, which I will explain further, we have vision, perseverance, passion, and movement. I'm going to invite you now to join me in my garden as I talk about this further. Welcome to my garden in winter. There's not much growing here. This is winter in Victoria, so dead leaves keeping the plants safe. But I brought you in here for a very particular purpose. It's because I actually have a part of my garden that is built in a medicine wheel. And so I have the 4 directions, and I want to talk about these 4 directions as the elements of a circle. So you'll remember that we started all of this with this amazing vision off Gonzales Hill. And I asked you to have big vision. And big vision in the teaching I was given starts in the east. So come join me in the east in my circle. This rock sits in the east. The east is the place traditionally of new beginnings, of fresh starts. It makes sense when you think about sunrise. In the teaching that I received from Elder Renee Mishake, when we talked about goal setting, and he shared with me that goal setting was a very Western way to think about things, and that in his Anishinaabe teachings, that he had a circle. And where I would start with a set of plans to get somewhere, in the teachings of the circle, we start in the east with vision. We start by actually imagining, creating, touching into what's important to us. It's really thinking about how my gifts will manifest. And so in the east, we begin with vision. You would tend to think that the next thing we would hit, which is actually the south, which is behind my rose bush, it's sleeping right now. This is my rock in the south. So the south in the circle is about perseverance. It's about actually getting in and digging into things. It's getting into the nitty gritty. It's figuring out the plan part. It's the hard part often. And we do think coming out of vision that we would have all this passion and excitement. But Renee told me that we start in the east, and at the bottom, we come into the south, and we actually just have to dig in and do some hard work. The next part of this comes in the west. This is my rock for the west. And the west is passion. It is the lifting up of our spirits. After having worked really hard, we now actually get some fruit going. It's growing on our trees. We're getting excited about how it's going. We can see the project coming to fruition, our vision that we began with. And from this, it vaults us up into the north. This is my rock for the north. And this is movement. In the traditional Western goal setting setup, which is usually shared as a S.M.A.R.T acronym, those letters stand for, to be successful, specific, measurable, accountable or achievable, realistic and timely. That's how you get to your goal. Very Western way of thinking. And then we know it's goal achieved. In this model that I was taught, it's about movement. And we actually vision something. So I'm not trying to think about what's realistic. If I had to think about what was realistic, I would mostly bring out my inner critic who would tell me I will never achieve anything. And I always think the idea of timely is very funny in that acronym, because I think that's good if you're selling widgets, and I'm not sure what it has to do with art and the creation of art. Specific is helpful, yes, that comes. Measurable as much as we can. Achievable is another dangerous one, that A. Achievable will only let our inner critic out to yell at us and tell us why we won't get somewhere. I'll talk a little more about that later, but I did want to share just the juxtaposition of a Western model of how we move things ahead to goal achieved, and invite you to join me in this particular class to really think through a different worldview, through the Anishinaabe view that I have been taught, which talks about vision, perseverance, passion, and then movement. And now we'll move on to the next stage of our development. We're artists, and so we are probably pretty excited at this point about the ideas we're coming up with. They're bubbling inside of us, and they're filled with passion, the thing that makes things go forward for us. Our passion is fired up by what we value. We get excited about our project and we want to get going on it. But you may remember from the teaching we have from Elder Renee Mishake, we don't actually have passion next on our circle. Next on our circle is perseverance. If we think about it, I think it probably makes sense. We would assume that after we vision what we want to create and we've discovered and immersed ourselves in what fires our values to do this work, we would be filled with passion. But this is now the time of the hard work. And perseverance to me means many things in community engagement. It's going to mean stepping into uncomfortable spaces, maybe making a phone call to talk to someone you don't know, someone who may seem to be more powerful than you. It might sort of initiate inside of you that feeling of, who am I to call this person? Maybe my idea is stupid, all those inner dialogues that get in our way. So it can be uncomfortable in perseverance. And it can be the time of a lot of the work that's not the fun, creative work. Planning, budgeting. Where is the money going to come from? There's a number of things that live inside perseverance. But inside of perseverance, we can hang on to our vision, which is our fuel, and it will help carry us through. With your vision, it's time to start thinking about that connection to community. Who will you be doing this project with? Who is this project ultimately for? Who are your partners on this project? To begin this piece of the journey, which I think really does live in perseverance, I want you to start to think about where the edges of their world intersect with the edges of your world. Welcome back to the land and to the water. I want to talk about community work and engagement through the idea of where our edges meet. Community work is about engagement with people and building relationships, not with the entity, but individuals. It's personal. In this work, you need to show up as yourself, with all of your elements in place, what is uniquely you. When you start this, bring your full self, bring your heart. Be clear about what you have to share. What are your gifts? Ask, what do you need? Don't be prescriptive. Don't assume. Ask what is needed and look for where your edges meet. Where's the overlap with what you have to offer and what they need? Your territory, their territory. You can be very different, like land and water. But there is power when you meet. And just as these edges meet between the ocean and the shore, new things are formed. There's transformation. Water, earth, you and your partners. Be curious about where edges meet. I want to tell you another story, one that I'm going to be sharing throughout the rest of this video, I think, because I feel that it really illustrates what we're talking about. It was my very first time to move into a community situation to build a project. It was when I began my job at Pacific Opera Victoria as the Director of Community Engagement. And I had been given a connection through an introduction with someone who worked in Indigenous education here in Victoria. I was living in a very Western mindset. First of all, I was feeling really nervous because I was in a job for which I wasn't sure I really had the credentials, education for. I had come into this job as an artist with a passion and experience in some places, but I wasn't sure that I had what I needed. And I wanted to look, air quotes, professional. I wanted to fit the mold. I wanted to do it right. And these are good instincts, but in my attempts to do it right, I did it in a very sort of 1950s office model, I think. I think in Western culture, we really think that time has a great value, and we think respect of time looks a certain way. So I will email you, I will leave you a phone message, I'll short text you, because I don't want to waste your time. And what I discovered very deeply in this initial move into community is that respect and time look different to different communities and different people. So while I was phoning and leaving voice messages, sort of trying to get together with some quick meeting to put something into a grant, I was getting no response from this person. And I was perplexed because I thought I was being respectful, but I was not getting anywhere. It took 2 months for me to actually get a return phone call. And then it was not on my timeline of all what I thought was respectful or just to move right to the heart of the project. Instead, it was an invitation to meet and to come in person. And so I remember very clearly going over at 9 a.m. to meet them at the education offices, and tea was made and conversation. Who was my family? Who was their family? Where did we grow up? What kind of people do we know in town? Where are we connected through different communities or experiences? This took 50 minutes of the 1-hour meeting. Never once did we talk about, at that time, the project I had in mind. In the final 10 minutes, she asked me what I was thinking about. And I mentioned that I worked at this opera company and I wanted to be able to offer something back through the education system for Indigenous youth. She said, I think I have 2 people you could meet. And thus came the next introduction. I left there knowing quite deeply that what I thought was respect about time, I was quite incorrect about. And actually what was important was to build a relationship, and that it was going to be made over tea, and it was going to take time. And it was an education for me in moving out of the corporate or what I thought it needed to look like so that people knew I could be trusted or I was respectable, and to really embrace the personal and the warmth and the authentic. What was authentically me and what was authentically the person I was meeting, so we could find a way to connect. It didn't mean that the work wasn't important, but it meant that something had to come before, basically, I would say in my Western language, I pitched the project. So moving out of Western mind is a little bit of letting go of the doing, get it done. It's a shift in how we understand time. And I think when you move into community, you'll find that there are many ideas about what respect looks like, how time is valued, what kind of lead-in time people need, how well do they need to get to know you before you can even begin to work together. So remembering that we started with our vision and we talked about perseverance, this might be another reason why passion is not next. Because passion just sort of blows over top of people, and it's really my agenda and what I see. And that's not what happens at this stage. When we bring our edges together, we're looking for places of contact where we can meet and find something of benefit for both of us. So as you think about your community project, how you want to use your art in a civic practice, I would say think about the people you work with. What does respect look like? Try to move away from the transactional way of working with people, which is a very Western exchange. And I would also say, build community. Take the time to have a cup of tea and have a conversation. Take a moment now and journal for yourself. Consider, if someone were to approach you to create a project, how would you want that to be unfolding? Would you want to meet them over coffee? Go for a walk? Would you prefer an email? Phone messages? What would inspire your trust if you moved away from efficiency and the idea of how time is used as respect? How would you want to build this relationship? What would help you get on board with the project? What would inspire you to want to work with that person? What would your non-negotiables be? What would feel rude? Consider now how many unwritten rules about engagement there are, even for yourself, and be curious about how you interact with others in all spaces and those unwritten rules of engagement that you bring into the space. And what would you like to do differently next time you engage with someone? We've moved through perseverance and we've arrived at passion. Passion is about fire. The other thing about passion is it can be your passion, but it can also be part of our work to ignite the fire in someone else, to create a passionate response in our partners, in our team that's working with us on this path of civic engagement. The fire represents a number of things in terms of passion. It also represents to me the warmth of our relationships. And so I want to talk about passion through relationships and building those relationships. So I want to tell you the next part of the story of when I went to create this program with the Indigenous education people here in Victoria. So after I'd had my tea, I'd had my conversation and made my relationship with one person, she agreed to introduce me to two other people who she thought would be really helpful for my project, because I wanted to offer something into the school, and she had people working on a theatrical project. Two teachers working with Indigenous youth after school. It was called Sacred Circle, and it involved telling a traditional story. It was all Indigenous in the cast. So something that was important, of course, was that I would come and meet again. There was tea made again, and I went through the same process as the first time. I had to have conversation. I explained who I was and who my people were. I heard about both of those women and who their people were. And after we'd spent an hour at this, the question came around again. What do you want? They asked me. And I said, well, I'm an opera company. I was there on behalf of Pacific Opera, and we have a lot of resources. And I wonder what you need. And I listed some of the things that I could offer them as resources. So my passion was to support them and benefit them, but I didn't really know what they needed or how that might be achieved, but I thought they would know. The response was really interesting. After I'd offered up different things that I could offer through our shop, technical support, stage management, props, set painting, or vocal production, they looked at me long and hard and said no one had ever asked them what they needed or what they wanted. Everyone who had come to them had always said, we need you to come at this time, give us this, show us this, and then go. This was a real game changer for me in my understanding of relationships. And I had learned this through some of my other conversations, the importance of not assuming what people needed, not just taking in my program and layering my program on top. But I, in that moment, really understood what it meant to them that I just offered, what do you need, what do you want? Here are some things I have. And it's really transformed the way that I move into civic engagement spaces. I will often have ideas, programs that I think might be fun or interesting, but I carry them in a way that I would say is not too tight and not too loose. I do want to bring something in when I'm building a relationship, some ideas. I will want to have learned something about that community and what I think might resonate for them, but I'm very keen to offer something that has a lot of room so that the person I'm building the relationship with can offer ideas too. They can step into that space. And so it becomes a brainstorm out of a seed of an idea, rather than me bringing a, this is the project, do you want to do it? So I suggest to you that you might start to think about relationship building in these early meetings that are fired up by your fiery passion, are an opportunity to plant a seed that will fire up the passion in the person you want to work with, or the community that you want to work with. I want to tell you one more story about relationship building, and I think a very valuable teaching I received. Several years ago, I was at a gathering of Métis people, and someone from the local territory was speaking. And one of the people from my community, the Métis community, asked that particular local Indigenous knowledge keeper What could we as a Métis community do to support reconciliation here on this local territory? And he didn't even hesitate. I think it's an enormous question. And he looked at us and said, walk beside us. Don't walk in front, don't walk behind. Walk beside us. This is an amazing way and a deep and wise way to enter into relationship. When we walk in front, we're offering often a hand back, as if we think someone is lesser and they need our help. It's not how we build relationship. To walk behind people is to talk about the shame or the guilt we feel. We are people of privilege. We have something we need to pay back. It puts us in a lesser place that doesn't support either. But when we walk beside people, then we are walking as equals. Then we are building a really authentic relationship. We're actually listening to one another, perhaps more than we're speaking often. Walking beside builds something that can continue on beyond whatever this project is. I'm grateful for both of these experiences because they taught me a lot. They were both places I would not have expected to have come up with those ideas or answers, but they have been guideposts for me as I have worked in civic engagement. So I think I want to leave you with this thought. Passion, our fire, is a secret sauce. And it's one we want to take care of. It's one we want to nurture in ourselves and in the relationships that we build. The color of action is green. New growth. This cedar hedge, it holds that for me. It holds that teaching. It's a reminder every time I see it. The energy of green and growth moves us forward. We visioned, we built relationships, we worked, we persevered, we connected with our passion, and the result is new growth, movement. We have come to the top of our circle. Vaulted by passion, we have movement. Something has happened and something is different. Not goal achieved. This is not the end, but part of the ongoing process of engaging. Movement. In this model of visioning, we don't have goal achieved. We have movement. Nature's reminder of change is the wind. Nature brings in the wind to clean out the old, to bring in the new. As you listen to this wind and see it in the trees, think about how you, embarking on this project, let the winds of change come through. Think about what's getting cleaned out. What do you need to let go of? And what is the movement you are envisioning? Recognize as you set a project in motion that you are never truly in control. Mother Nature shows us this with the wind. The elements are interacting with you, and you create together. And so we find ourselves at the top of our circle. Vision, perseverance, passion have vaulted us to the top, which is not goal achieved, which would be our Western definition of we have achieved the goal that we have set out, but movement. I love movement. It has so much room for forgiveness, kindness, room for the flexibility of what happens in the moment, room for the edges of our partnerships to bring us to something different, relationships. And in movement, now that we're here, in your project, you have time to reflect. This is the time to gather your insights about what's happened. I want to start not with what you have learned from the experience, but I want to encourage you to think about who this project allowed you to be. When we live our values, when we walk in a way that addresses what is most important to us, it allows us to be who we are here to be, to manifest our gifts. There are many ways we can manifest them. But this being piece, that's the part that makes our life fulfilling and actually brings greatest benefit to our communities. This can be difficult for us. We're in a culture where we're mostly looking for what's not working and we want to fix things all the time. But this is a moment to gather compliments. And if it's helpful, to write them down. What people have reflected back to you, what it meant to them. These are the stories that you would later use when you wanted to actually raise more money or write a grant application or report out on the grant that you actually employed on this project. It's a way you can inspire other people to join you. The compliments you receive are not really you did a good job. It's really someone telling you that you've moved something in their life and they want you to know that. So gather those compliments. It's also important to notice that we need to hear 10 compliments for every criticism, I believe, because criticism lodges so deeply in us. I believe it goes back to our reptile brain when if we didn't really log the criticism, be careful when you go outside, you'll be eaten by a tiger, you'll be eaten by a tiger. We're not really getting eaten by tigers so much, but I still think that idea of the correction lands so deeply, and we tend to take our compliments and toss them away and say people are just being nice. Don't do that. Log them, write them down, gather evidence for yourself about what worked in this project. What in your vision came to fruition. This is also the time of what's next. In the original circle I have from my elder, I have movement at the top and then a little arrow pointing back to vision because we're not done. That's why it's not goal achieved. We actually now take what we got from this experience and we move it into what we'll create next. What is the next vision for you? The other important piece of this process is to talk to your partner, whoever you worked with, whoever your team was, whoever your community partner was. Debrief with those people that you worked on this with and ask them, was this the impact they were looking for? And for them, what would be next? What would they love to see? Keep a record of all of this. This is all valuable, even the things that didn't work out. Everything is filled with learning, inspiration, passion, more perseverance tips, things that you can take into your next project. In many ways, I see every community project that I engage in as a chance to get clearer and clearer about what motivates my work, but also to take better and better care of the partners I work with. So everything that goes slightly astray are really big learning opportunities for me to do a better job next time and actually be of more benefit, be kinder, and make a more powerful impact. It is a good time to savor. It's a lot of work to put a community project together. It requires so much open-hearted listening and so much patience. But I know that it's completely worth it, having done a number of them, and certainly the one that I have told you the stories about with the education work with the Indigenous art students who were giving a performance, being a small part of youth's journey into arts and giving them some opportunity and opening up a bigger world, something I have access to. I felt like that was good work, and it was reflected back to me that it was impactful. And so I continue on, and I hope that you'll find through the process of the next several workshops inspiration for yourself this way, so that you too will carry on and make an impact. There is so much for us to talk about in the world of civic engagement, and so much learning that I want to share. I have loved putting together this little video chat for us so that I could share some of my personal experiences and really dig into the fuel of what I think makes it go, and offer to you an opportunity to reflect on how you see project management and moving it out of that Western lens of goal achieved and specifics, measurables, reasonable, achievable, and really inviting you into a different worldview to imagine how a project might unfold. When we meet again, I will have 6 live workshops coming up. And in those, I have some amazing guests, people who I have learned from, people who inspire me. And I'm really thrilled that you'll have a chance to hear from so many different voices in this field to really supplement your civic practice. Until we meet again, be kind to yourself and take good care.